Good evening, everyone. I hope this everything is fine from your end. Hope this video finds you in the pink of health. Okay, the title of topic of this video is success in science. Okay, colon is there a cultural misalignment in India? Okay, let us begin this video with a very interesting twist. Let us rewind to around 2200 years ago in Greece, ancient Greece particularly, and revisit the geocentric theory. The geocentric theory, which is also known as the Ptolemaic system, named after Ptolemy, is an ancient cosmological model that places the Earth at the center of the universe, and it postulates that the sun, moon, planets, and stars are orbiting it. At the time, it was not even known that stars were other suns as it is known today. This model was comprehensively developed by Ptolemy in the second century and remained the dominant view for centuries. However, it was based on earlier work also. He was a Greco-Roman mathematician, astronomer, and geographer who wrote many scientific treatises, all of which influenced science greatly. Okay, this was however based on older and pre-existing frameworks which were brought together in so-called harmonious fashion. However, the heliocentric model with the sun at the center was introduced by Copernicus in the 16th century AD famously. The geocentric model, while no longer accepted, is a significant part of the history of astronomy and cosmology, marking a transition towards a more up to date, more contemporary view framework of the universe. Okay. Claimed evidence for geocentrism were the apparent daily movement of celestial bodies around the Earth and a feeling of the Earth being stationary and moving. So, this is what early humans and ancient humans felt. They felt because the Earth resembles a plate, it could not be a sphere, and that all the other planets, stars, and moons also must be orbiting it. Okay, and empiricism also has its limits. This is what I have been talking about always. So, if you want to inculcate and develop higher order thinking, suppose a superior entity being exists or not, you'll have to understand adopt interdisciplinary transdisciplinary frameworks. Dogma is not the way. Talk to as many people as possible and develop cogent, coherent, comprehensive theories. Okay, I've spoken about cross-cultural design, inductive approaches, grounded theory, etc. all along. Please keep reading my previous works. Okay, and the claimed evidence for geocentrism was formally subsequently falsified with the advent of the telescope and subsequently satellites, rockets, and all that. And if you see the key heliocentric theory, this is known as the heliocentric model. According to this model, the sun is placed at the center of the universe. At the time, it was not known that there were many solar systems, and the Earth is supposedly uh, orbiting it. Most models naturally believe that the sun was bigger than the Earth, but exact dimensions of the sun were unknown until more recently. Okay, the sun is therefore at the center of the solar system. The Earth and the planets orbit the sun. Okay, the therefore Earth and planets do not. Therefore, other planets do not revolve around Earth, but rather around the sun. And long before Copernicus, there was an individual called Aristarchus of Samos. Okay, Aristarchus of Samos was an ancient Greek astronomer and mathematician. He presented the first known heliocentric model that places the sun at the center of the universe, with the Earth revolving around the sun once a year and rotating about its own axis around the day. Most of his works are lost, but they are only attested indirectly. We also had another individual by name Philolaus. Philolaus believed that the Earth was not the center of the universe like Aristarchus, and his version is credited among the earliest versions of heliocentrism. His theory is that the Earth was not the center of the universe, but rather the sun is. Philolaus discussed a central fire at the center of the universe, and the spheres, including the sun, revolved around it. There are very many different versions. Then many of these are not discarded, but at a broad level, his theory is correct. There was another Greek thinker called Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras also supported the theory according to which the sun was just another star. He deduced a correct explanation for eclipses and described the sun as a fiery mass larger than the Peloponnese, and he also attempted to explain rainbows and meteors as well to great level detail. Pelonop- Peloponnesus is a region in the southern tip of Greece. Okay, the southernmost tip of Greece, and that was an area which is familiar with. And of course, later, if you fast forward to several centuries after Christ, the death of Christ, we have the Renaissance, which is a period of significant cultural and artistic flourishing in Europe, roughly spanning the 14th to 17th centuries AD. It followed the late Middle Ages, famously known as Dark Ages or the Ages of Knights, okay, which were a nadir, okay, in Western history, rock bottom. Western civilization reached rock bottom levels, after which it recovered impressively, okay. It is characterized, the Renaissance period is characterized by a renewed interest in classical antiquity, marking a transition from the medieval period to modernity, to the modern epoch or period. Okay, this revival during the Renaissance led to advancements in art, science, literature, mathematics, and it also led to the adoption of humanistic ideals and the dogma of the clergy and the church gradually waned. This was, however, by no means an easy or a sudden or a rapid process. Okay, and human potential and human achievement were also stressed upon. That is something we need to do in developing countries such as India so that they rise. Okay, major advances were also made in science during this period. This was also a period of immense social, cultural, and economic change. Some important scientists of the period were Copernicus. Nicolaus Copernicus, born 1473 AD, died 1543 AD, lived in Poland, okay, Prussia. He was a Renaissance polymath who formulated a model of the universe that placed the sun rather than the earth at the center. However, he escaped the persecution of the church, probably because he was not in Italy. Tycho Brahe, 1546 to 1601, was a Danish astronomer of the Renaissance known for his accurate astronomical observations. He was also an astronomer, astrologer, and alchemist. He was a large major astronomer before the invention of the telescope and has been described as the greatest pre telescopic astronomer. Johannes Kepler, 1571 to 1630, was a German astronomer, mathematician, astrologer, natural philosopher. Also, he was a key figure in the 17th century scientific revolution. He is best known for his laws of planetary motion. His books were Astronomia Nova, Harmonies Mundi, and Epitome Astronomiae Copernicanae. Okay, he also influenced many other people, such as Isaac Newton. He also provided the basic tenets for the doctrine of gravitation or gravitational force of gravitational energy, which is one of the foundations of pillars of modern science. Okay, his varied work made Kepler one of the founders and fathers of modern astronomy, the scientific method, natural and modern science. Okay, we also had Isaac Newton, 1643 to 1727. He was an English polymath, active as a mathematician, physicist, astronomer, alchemist, theologian, and author. Newton was a key figure in the scientific revolution and the enlightenment that followed. Okay, his book Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, was published in 1687, achieved the first great unification of physics and established classical mechanics. He also famously discovered the law of gravity as an apple fell on his head, as the story goes. Okay, and Newton also made several contributions to science, including optics, and shares credit to German mathematician Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz for developing the science of calculus. Okay, calculus is very important. We have integral calculus, differential calculus, etc. today. However, Isaac Newton supposedly was one of the progenitors in this regard and laid the foundation for calculus before other people did. We also have Galileo Galilei, who was an Italian astronomer, physicist, and a polymath. He was born in the city of Pisa. It's an important city in Pisa, associated with the Leaning Tower of Pisa. He has been called the father of observational astronomy, modern era classical physics, scientific method, and modern science. He studied speed and velocity, gravity, free fall, etc. He also studied the principles of relativity, inertia, projectile motion. He also worked in applied science and technology. He built an improved telescope based on earlier work by Lippershey. Hans Lippershey was a German spectacle maker who developed a crude early version of the telescope, which was later improved by Galilei and others. Okay, Galileo Galilei was put under house arrest. Okay, he was first tried by the Roman Inquisition in 1633 and later put under house arrest. He was not imprisoned apparently and died, and can continue to receive visitors for many years. Okay, we also subsequently had the Enlightenment. Enlightenment is also known as the Age of Reason. It was a period of significant intellectual and cultural change in Europe, primarily during the 18th century. There was an emphasis on reason, the human reason to understand the world, and key ideas such as enlightenment emphasized concepts such as liberty, progress, toleration, separation of church and state, etc., which should be the basis for other societies such as the Islamic society in India also. Okay, the Enlightenment period influenced various social and political movements, including the American and French revolutions later. Notable thinkers during this period included John Locke, Immanuel Kant, Isaac Newton, Voltaire. Okay, it took root in many parts of Europe, such as Italy, France, UK, etc. During the time of the Enlightenment, people's attitudes towards science gradually changed. Intellectuals became more scientifically inclined, though not always the masses. Till the early 19th centuries, even astronomers had no idea about the vastness of the cosmos, and that has been known only for the past couple of decades. And this extrasolar planets have been discovered only since the 90s. Therefore, people's ideas and mind orientation can change with the passage of time, as has been proven from time to time. Likewise, Japan only modernized and opened up to the West after Meiji Restoration. So, intellectual and cultural revolutions, as I have spoken about, can take place. Renaissances and enlightenments can take place in India and other places also, Africa and other places. And many other mysteries were researched of life were researched in this period. One question is that is the origin of life. Researchers also speculated on the origin of life. There were two important theories on the origin of life, that is biogenesis and abiogenesis. Biogenesis means life arose from earlier forms of life. Abiogenesis means life arose from non-life. Okay, dead matter. The term biogenesis refers to the theory that all life comes from other living things. Abiogenesis refers to the theory that living things come from other non-living things such as mud, slime, and dew. Okay, there were many experiments carried out, such as Louis Pasteur's swan-like flask experiment. This refuted the theory of spontaneous generation by demonstrating that living organisms can only arise from other living organisms, not from non-living matter. This experiment and other experiment of others like Francisco Reddy's meat experiments supported the principle of biogenesis, which states that life only comes from life. We also had Lazzaro Spallanzani's experiments, which involved boiling broth and sealing it, which prevented microbial growth. This suggested that microbes were not spontaneously generating but brought protected from outside. However, the origin of life has not been satisfactorily explained, and there are no overarching and wide comprehensive theories in this regard. I have discussed this in several of my books on religion and on the God debate. Please do read those. I have also taken the views of many scholars in the recent past. And while traditional theories of God are somewhat doubtful, there are a lot of mysteries of the origin cosmos that we have not understood. So God has been defined in many different ways, and there are many dimensions and facets, aspects to the debate. So please do read my work, okay? And from the mid 15th, 16th century onwards, there was also a challenge to the power of the church. There was corruption within church organization, which manifested in many ways, including financial misappropriation, abuse of power, the exploitation of vulnerable individuals, the issue of indulgences by the church for atonement or penitence. This has also been observed. The church had become quite corrupt. Crusades and other missions were launched. Okay, and we had people like Giordano Bruno, who was an Italian philosopher, poet, alchemist, astrologer, etc. He was known for his cosmological theories, which conceptually extended to include the then novel Copernican model. He proposed that stars were distant suns surrounded by their own planets. Now these planets are known as extrasolar planets or exoplanets. And he also proposed the theory that other planets around other stars may harbor life like our own. This was too much for the church because it was too radical and novel for them. And the church dogmatically asserted that these challenged the postulates of the Bible, okay, which was then the Christian holy book. And below, the Bruno was burnt in the stake uh, by the church in the year 1600. I think it was February 17th, 1600, if I remember. February 17th. Okay. And we then also had Martin Luther, 1483 to 1546. He was a German theologian, professor, pastor, and church reformer. He began the Protestant Reformation with the publication of his 95 Theses on October 31st, 1517. In this publication, he attacked the church's sales of indulgences. His movement gave rise to Protestantism as it's the third major force within Christianity or Christian doctrine. This was along with Roman Catholicism and the Eastern Orthodoxy, which is less well known. And slowly, eventually, as science progressed, the biblical theory of evolution was questioned. It did not stand up to observations made by scientists till that point of time. Evolution in a biological context, therefore, refers to change in the heritable characteristics of biological populations of successive generations. Okay, this theory gradually took root. This change occurs through processes such as natural selection, genetic drift and mutation, founder syndrome, genetic bottleneck, and other factors I have discussed previously. This leads to an increased adaptation of organisms to their environment and potentially resulting in the emergence of new species. Okay, Charles Darwin initially called this desert descent with modification, and speciation and macromutation can also occur. Okay, more recently, evolution has been synthesized with more contemporary sciences such as genetics, give rise to more cogent and uh, comprehensive explanations. These can be found in any standard textbook, but I have discussed these previously as well. And early people who believe, researchers who believe, scientists who believed in evolution were Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. He was a French nationalist, biologist, academic, and soldier. He was an early proponent of the idea that biological evolution occurred and proceeded in accordance with natural laws. Jean-Baptiste Lamarck's theory of evolution, which is known as Lamarckism or inheritance of acquired characters, proposed that organisms could pass on traits they acquired during their lifetime to their offspring. This meant that if an organism like a giraffe stretched its neck to reach higher branches, its offspring could inherit a longer neck. He also spoke about the use and disuse of inherited organs. This theory is widely discarded, has been completely discarded, and improved versions have been postulated. Okay. However, Lamarck's theory was influential in the early development of intentional thought. Subsequently, it was overridden and superseded by other theories. Okay. The reason why it is discredited is because there is no evidence to support the inheritance of acquired characteristics. Okay. And we also had another individual called Erasmus Darwin. He also proposed the theory of evolution. Erasmus Darwin is Charles Darwin's grandfather. Charles Darwin was an English naturalist, geologist, and biologist. Is widely known for his theory of evolutionary biology. He took a famous a voyage of the Beagle to Galapagos Islands and other islands. Okay, his proposition that all species of life have descended from a common ancestor is now generally accepted and considered to be a basic scientific theory fact. Okay, Charles Darwin wrote several books, and his most famous books was The Origin of Species. Okay, these books covered natural history, which now are called geology, paleontology, zoology, botany, anthropology, psychology, and evolutionary biology. The Origin of Species is one of the most important books on scientific research. He actually pushed it to publication because um, Alfred Russel Wallace was also about to publish a book. So he put aside his plans for a more comprehensive treatise and rushed this to publication. Herbert Spencer was another English polymath. He was also a philosopher, psychologist, biologist, sociologist, and anthropologist, and he proposed the concept survival of the fittest. Okay, and he wrote a book called Principles of Biology in 1864, and this was published subsequent to Charles Darwin's 1859 book on the origin of species. He also proposed social Darwinism, and he proposed the principles of evolution, including natural selection, uh, that which apply to social human society, social classes, and individuals as well. This concept is known as social Darwinism. Okay, Alfred Russel Wallace was an English naturalist. He was also an explorer and geographer, biologist, and anthropologist. He also independently conceived the theory of evolution through natural selection. His 1858 paper on the subject was published that year alongside extracts from Charles Darwin's earlier writings of this topic. Okay, now, if you see the early reception to Charles Darwin's ideas and to the ideas proposed by other revolutionists, okay, initially they faced some resistance among the clergy and among other scientists. So, however, they eventually gained broader acceptance, and even religious figures gradually had to uh, act it. Accept it. Even today, the church accepts evolution. However, it believes that there is a force, invisible hand guiding evolution. This may or may not be true. Okay, there was, however, a lot of debate and controversy at the time in the middle of the 19th century regarding evolution, And there were many critics of Charles Darwin, most notably Richard Owen, Samuel Wilberforce, St. George Jackson Ewart, and Fleming Jenkins. Okay, some Christian apologists also condemned evolution, and many of even today many intelligent design proponents were associated with the right wing clergy, Christian clergy. They also criticize evolution, and even there are some critics in the Hindu far right. The Hindu creationism also still prevails in some pockets today. You must make sure that it goes away because Hinduism itself is a very diverse and dynamic religion. It is not associated with one doctrine or dogma. So I don't see Hinduism being in conflict with science fundamentally, okay, foundationally, and it played a major role. The theory of creation, the evolution played a major role in challenging religious beliefs. It also had social implications, cultural implications, implications for science. Okay, it also led to faster scientific progress, and it had influence on many facets of scientific activity. It also had a very broad cultural impact. Okay, and another theory was the theory of genetics. Mendel was an American friar and monk. Okay, Gregor Mendel, through his work on pea plants, discovered the fundamental laws of inheritance. He deduced that genes come in pairs and are inherited as distinct units, one from each parents. Okay, mostly he worked on pea plants. Okay, however, it was later found that most of his work was applicable to all species as well. Though initially some people did not accept that idea, they believed that it may be specific to pea plants alone. But this notion and contention was eventually falsified. He also proposed the law of dominance, the law of segregation, law of independent assortment, etc. He died in obscurity partly because he was relatively silent and not outgoing, okay, gregarious, and partly because he published in German, okay. He was a very quiet person, and later his work came to be around the year 1900, between 1900 and 1905. Karl Karens, von Schermack, and Hugo Bryce rediscovered his work, and later it came to be synthesized with other theories of evolution. And many years later, the double helix structure was discovered. And I have briefly discussed recent progress in evolutionary biology. Please read my work. I cannot condense everything into this video; it's too big. Okay, we have also had discovery of extrasolar planets, and the first discovery of extrasolar planet around the main sequence star happened in 1995 by Michael Mayer and Didier Queloz of the University of Geneva. Okay, the Indian origin scientist Dr. Nico Masuhan also claims to have found evidence of lives of 120 light years away in a distant planet. Okay, so if India and other countries have to progress in science, we must do away with all ideologies. Ideologies can damage science, including scientific ideologies. We had written extensively about this previously. While intellectual Marxism is on the decline, we have Hindutva. Hindutva people push their own misrepresentation of exchange, which are very bad for science. You have theories like the Vedic Indus theory, out of India theory, which proposes India as the IU Hammett. Okay, Hindutva group must think again and act in favor of science. Hindutva group must think again and act in favor of the nation. Okay, they must also understand that they are indirectly damaging national interests. Okay, Hinduism is inherently flexible compared to Islam and Christianity. It must be kept that way, otherwise, it will damage the good name of Hinduism. Okay, many of these left wing, right wing ideologies have no emphasis on objectivity, only adherence to their ideology. Indians can, however, change in one generation. All this requires is a generational change. The next generation may be more scientifically inclined. We must make this happen. We have written about structured perception techniques for social cultural change, semiotic approach to social cultural change, Eureka mini, Eureka points, etc. India is already the third largest publisher of research publications. The quality of Indian publications, however, lags behind the West. We must reform pedagogy, also teach more innovation, creative thinking, lateral thinking, out of the box thinking, focus more on concepts and application rather than rote learning. Please read my previous publications and listen to my previous video. With this, I bring this video to an end. Thank you very much once again. Bye.